Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a review from a blue-orange game. This one is called Queendomino. It is the sequel to Kingdomino by Bruto Catala.
Yes, and as everyone knows, we both like Bruno. I'm a big fan of Bruno's myself. I have to admit something. I wasn't the biggest fan of Kingdomino.
Neither was I.
But Queendomino remedies some of the things I think that a gamer would want from the game.
Yeah, so it's still very much a tile placement game.
Yeah.
It's still a very short game. It can be played in about 25 to 35 minutes, even with 4 players. The game changes just a little bit with 2 players. You're actually playing with 2 of your pawns in a 2-player game. And you're also going to be building a smaller tableau in a 4-player game, a 5x5 tableau, where in a 2-player game it can be expanded to a 7x7. And that's because you're going to be going through all the different tiles in the game. Now these tiles are basically dominoes from which the game derives its name. Now these tiles have 2 different types or even the same type on each different side. Now these are the different terrains that you're going to be placing around your castle.
Yeah, and it plays at its core, just like Kingdomino, you're going to be drafting these tiles in the same fashion that you did in Kingdomino. If you're not familiar with that, you're going to lay tiles out one at a time. You're going to choose them with your pawn. And then you're going to have 4 more tiles come out, and in player order from top to bottom, you're going to take that and put it on the next one, and so forth.
Yeah, and these tiles are numbered on the back side, so they come in a numerical value, with the lesser tiles being the lower numbered value, and the better, juicier tiles, typically with more scoring options, as the higher value. And they're going to actually be organized in that way, so when you pick something that's really good, you're going to be going last in the next round, which is the crux within the game. So let's talk about all the different components, or all the components in general in this game. You have a number of money. Each player is going to start with $7 in this game. Each player is going to start with a castle on a wild card. Now anything can be placed around your castle at the start of the turn. You're also going to start with a knight. These guys are new in the game. You have knights and you have towers. Your knights are going to go out there and collect taxes from your citizens to be able to give you an influx of money to buy buildings. Now again, buildings are completely new within this game. You're going to be actually placing buildings upon your kingdom, the construction tiles, which are red, in order to gain benefits both then and then at the end of the game.
Exactly, and that's really the big difference here. The game, like I said, is played very similarly with an extra layer. It doesn't add a layer of complexity, but when you're playing, you've got to take into consideration, when do you want to place a knight to collect some money? When do you want to spend that money to get a building? And of course, you got to be on the lookout for those construction sites as they come up in order to place those buildings.
Right. So you have a main board down the center of the table. Now this will house the different buildings. You have a giant stack of buildings. All these buildings are double-sided. These are going to be laid out in order from 0 to 5. That's the value that you have to spend in order to acquire that tile. These different tiled buildings will give you victory points at the end of the game. Some of them will give you additional knights. Some of them will give you towers. Again, towers are brand new to this game. Towers can score you points from very particular buildings that you get, but also whenever you acquire a tower, it goes immediately within your kingdom on that tile, and it will allow you to gather the queen. The queen is a brand new thing as well. This queen allows you to buy, if you own the queen, you're allowed to buy tiles for $1 less. And at the end of the game, she also acts as a crown somewhere within your kingdom.
Yeah, and that's a huge benefit to be able to buy these new building tiles at $1 less. So the queen, once someone takes the queen, the queen's gonna bounce around the table. If someone gets equal or greater number of towers on their kingdom, they take the queen from whoever might have it, and then they get that benefit. And like Jeremy said, she's going to serve as a crown at the end of the game for end of game scoring. And the crowns, if you don't remember from Kingdomino, you multiply the crowns in one colored area by the number of tiles in that area to get a score for that area.
Last new component is the dragon. We'll talk about the dragon when we talk about the turn order. So at the start of the game, we already have a game in progress, but at the very start of the game, players are just going to start with their basic castle in the center of their board, meaning that they can build their kingdom however they wish around the castle. So you could have a 5x5 on this side, have a 5x5 on this side, or have it smack dab in the middle. It just completely depends upon the way the tiles come out and how you wish to build. Each player is also going to start with $7 and 1 knight, and you're going to fill up the main board in the center. You're also going to seed the board randomly, so this turn order is completely random at the start of the game. And then you pick 4 new tiles, and you put them in numerical order and flip them over from lowest to highest value. And then you take your turn. So if I'm the white player, I'm simply going to take my pawn. The very first thing I do is I have to place my tile somewhere within my kingdom. Now, as I said, I already have a kingdom in progress. There is a rule when you place this. Number 1, in a 4-player game, your kingdom can only be a 5x5 grid, meaning that you can never go beyond that. If you happen to can only place the tile beyond that, you have to discard the tile and you can't place it. The second and even more important rule is that when you place your tile, it has to be adjacent to something that is already existing within your kingdom. So it has to be next to another construction red site, or next to a forest, or directly next to your castle, which acts as a wild. So this could be placed in any combination of these locations here, as long as I meet those criteria. Now that will exist there for the rest of the game. There's 3 optional things that you can do, and you have to do these in turn order. The first thing is you can place one of your knights. When you place a knight, it has to go onto that particular piece of terrain.
Right, you're going to place the knight on that terrain, and hopefully you've added to one big cluster of one type of terrain, because when you place the knight, you're going to collect $1 for every individual square of that color or territory type. Immediately. That's going to be money that you can then spend throughout the rest of the game, but more importantly, it's money that you can spend right now.
And make sure when you place that knight, it has to be on the piece or on that tile that you placed that turn. You can place 2 knights if you make a great cluster by placing that, and you have to place them on each individual side of that domino tile, but you could score for both of them. The third thing you could do on your turn, again, this is completely optional, is that you're allowed to construct one of the buildings. When you construct one of the buildings, you're simply paying the cost that's underneath and then adding it to a construction site, which is a red site.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be the tile that you just placed. It can be a construction site that you placed earlier. Oftentimes, you'll be able to build immediately on the construction site you built, and you might want to do that just to get the most out of some of those tiles. But just keep in mind, you can build all sorts of construction sites and then fill them over time once you've collected enough money.
Again, these will give you end of the game victory points, and they will also give you whatever is above them. Some of these will come with towers. Some of them will come with additional knights, so you'll be wanting to get more knights because you only start with one of them. Real quick example, I could buy this statue for 2, I'd get $1, and I can place it on the tile I just placed. That's 5 victory points at the end of the game for me.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing you need to keep in mind is those extra bonuses that you get with these tiles, like a knight, for instance, that order in which you do these after tile placement actions, you can't use that knight then to collect money on that same tile. You have to do the knight first, so you have to have a knight in your collection already.
Right. These tiles will not refill until the end of the round, so you have to buy them on your turn. Now, the third or the fourth possible thing you could do, or the third optional and final thing that you can do, is you can move the dragon. The dragon can only be moved once per turn. You can pay $1 to the bank and put them on any one of the still available tiles, and that basically kills that tile and prevents any player in the rest of the turn order from getting that particular tile.
Yeah, it adds a little player interaction that I don't think Queendomino had much of. You're going to be basically looking at the tiles you don't want your opponents to have and completely obliterating it.
The last thing, and this is the 5th thing you would do on your turn, and it is mandatory just like the first one, is you take that pawn, and then you get to choose any one of the 4 available tiles for the next round. Again, the ones that are higher up in the turn order will give you first pick on the next round after that. However, they're not as good, and the ones further down will put you in a further turn order, but they may have more crowns on them at the end of the game, which are just pure victory points.
Exactly.
So you're going to play until all the tiles in this deck are completely gone. At the end, you're going to tally up your point, and there's a giant, this is a point salad game. I mean, it really is a Euro-style point salad game. There's a whole list of different things, but the basic scoring structure is you're going to look at all of your different types of tiles, and you're going to count the terrain like terrains that are in a cluster and count how many crowns are in that. So if this was my final and you see a 4 cluster here with yellow, I have 1 crown. So each one of these scores 1 victory point. It's just a multiplier.
Right. And the cool thing about those building tiles is they can actually change up how you approach this game entirely compared to Kingdomino, because you generally want to keep those clusters together, and that still will benefit you, but some of these end-of-game scoring tiles will allow you to score points if you've split them apart.
And that's just as good in this game.
Yes, indeed.
This is you know what, neither one of us were huge fans of Kingdomino. And I think it may have been because it was just such a simple game, and it is still a very simple game, but this one adds a layer to it, and the scoring is basically what that adds to the game.
Exactly.
And it's a huge difference. I mean, being able to control these knights, use these knights to be able to go out and get money, because money now is worth victory points. I'm not sure, I can't remember if it was for the original game, but you score points for money. If you get a lot of these knights, you're going to be collecting a lot of victory points from them. And the idea of, as David just alluded to, in the original game, you never wanted to split up your territories. So you're always going for the territories that made sense. In this game, you typically want to go for some territories and get a cluster of 5 yellows in completely different non-adjacent areas, because there may be a tile that scores you 2 victory points for every non-adjacent area, and that's huge.
Right, it's cool because you can actually, you're still going to want to have one big cluster or a couple maybe. That's always going to be probably part of the game. But then when you get that opportunity to take a building that gives you points for the number of different, say, red clusters you have, that might be one that you haven't done so well on so far. Then you can sort of change your focus and say, well, I want more yellow for my big cluster, but I could use some red just for another 2 points. And those things stack too, because some of those buildings are duplicated, and you can have 2 of them, so you're going to get extra points for those.
I mean, as the holidays are approaching, actually they're here upon us, this is a fantastic game for a family setting. Absolutely for a family setting or for a gateway game. There's absolutely no reading in the game. So very young children can play this game and learn immediately how to set up and play it.
And a ton of nice, like this one gives a lot more flavor for what an enthusiast game wants to be, for sure. Without too much higher barrier to entry. This is the kind of game, if you played Kingdomino and thought, oh, it'd be cool if you did this and this, this answers that question, for sure.
Absolutely. So that is Queendomino from Blue Orange Games. Takes about 30 minutes to play. Ages 8 and up, so that actually is aged appropriately, for sure. If you guys have questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. Happy holidays to you guys, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.